It's the Red, and it's time to take the next step in our quest to become the absolute worst player to ever hold a Super Nintendo controller. Today we attempt to become the worst player ever at Super Mario World. We do this by completing the game with as few points scored as possible, just like a real low-skill player would. And to do that, we must avoid anything in the game that gives us points, including defeating enemies, collecting power-ups, and... actually, this time around, coins do not add to our score, so that's going to make things a lot easier. Well, actually, there's a little bit of an asterisk on that point. There are still a few types of coins that give us points, such as dragon coins, coins collected from a block, coins generated from an enemy defeated by a fireball, and coins generated after crossing the goal at the end of a stage. Other than that, coins are pretty much fair game, so we can go nuts on those. The only other rules to keep in mind is that deaths are allowed, but game over is not. And once again, only one player is allowed to play, so that there is only one score bar involved. So sorry, Luigi, it looks like you're sitting this one out too. Alright, so with the preliminaries out of the way, let's get this thing kicked off on Yoshi's Island. So right off the bat, we have an option to go left or right, and going to the left leads to the Yellow Switch Palace, but getting there requires going through Yoshi's Island 1, so hopefully we don't need to do that, and let's just go straight to Yoshi's Island 2. Going through this stage shows us a number of things that's going to make this run a lot easier. Very early on, we're going to have access to our secret weapon, Yoshi. Breaking open the Yoshi egg, no points. Eating enemies, no points. Berries, no points. Checkpoint gate, makes us big, and again, no points. There's a lot of things in this game that you would expect it to give you points, and it doesn't. But besides all that, this is still just an early level in the game, so there wasn't going to be really any issues here regardless. The only thing really to keep in mind is that we need to lead this Chargin' Chuck away from the goal gate before we approach it. Now once again, we do need to cross the goal when there's 1 second left on the clock, because the moment it reaches 0, you will die. But besides that, we also have to make sure we break the tape, so that it doesn't turn into a coin when we cross the goal. Unfortunately, I put myself in a pretty rough position where the tape was going to be at the very top of the goal when 1 second reached, so I couldn't reach it with a normal jump. So I dismounted Yoshi, hit the tape, and then landed back on his back right after I finished. Talk about raising the bar. Moving on to Yoshi's Island 3, we have ourselves a level with a lot of platforming in it, particularly on these extending platforms that come in and out. There was one tricky bit here where they put a dragon coin right in the middle of our jumping path. I thought I was going to have to give up Yoshi here, but I was still able to get past it with a carefully timed low jump. Other than that, not really any problems here. The same is true for Yoshi's Island 4. Not much in the way of hazards or trouble spots. Yoshi is able to bounce on the spike balls that are floating by, so for much of this level we don't need to rely on the sinking platforms in order to get through. But even if we did, this level's not that difficult, so another easy clear. And that's going to bring us to castle number 1, Iggy's castle. Yoshi is apparently too scared to enter structures such as this, even though he's been shown in other games to do exactly that, but whatever, I'm not going to judge. He wouldn't be much help anyway, as for most of this castle we have to climb along these grates over long pools of lava. The grates make it easy to avoid pretty much all the enemies and hazards in this room because we can move pretty much anywhere we need to go. So getting through this room scoreless is not a problem. The next room is even easier in that regard because there's barely anything here that even gives you points. Just watch out for the smashers, don't get pushed off the side, and just wait outside of the red door until just the right time to go face Iggy. Iggy moves down the slope a little bit each time we jump on his head. So we have to keep jumping on him until he falls into the lava, but also we need to do it while leaving a few seconds on the clock to complete his dying animation right as the stage ends. Finding the right time took a few tries, but 1 second time bonus, and we're moving on to Donut Plains. Now there's a lot to watch out for here in Donut Plains 1. We've got Super Koopas flying all over the place, baseballs being hurled everywhere, and even the power-ups are trying to ambush us now. But with some careful maneuvering and a little help from Yoshi's tongue, we eventually reach this point with a triangle block. Normally you're supposed to use it to run up the wall when it's been filled in via the green switch palace. But there are a few other ways to make it up here as well. But to get up there without adding to our score, we have to use Yoshi to bounce on the triangle block and then dismount him in order to complete the rest of the height, making this our first official Yoshi sacrifice. Pick up the key, put it in the keyhole, and we're done with this level, with no points added. Doing this opens the way to Donut Secret 1. It's a fairly straightforward level. All you're mainly doing is just swimming around fish, which can be a little tricky because of how many there are, but it's not too bad. Just be careful if you have to swim close next to a Rip Van fish, because shaking them is quite a pain. Once you reach this P-switch, pick it up and carry it with you up to these blocks over here so that they can be turned into coins. Knock out this block to get the key, and scoot your way into the keyhole. Time for the Donut Secret House, and at this point you probably have a pretty good idea of where we're headed, but bear with me a minute. There's not too much to watch out for here. We just have to get past a couple of boo rings, a giant boo here, resist the temptation to hit this coin block, and eventually we reach this area. We head further to the left, grab this P-switch, and then just set it on the ground right here until the time reads about 40 seconds. Jump on the switch, and then make your way up this vine to the secret door. We want to enter this door with about 32 seconds left on the clock so that we have just enough time to hit the big boo 3 times to take him out. One time I came in a second too late, and then this happened. And yeah, that didn't count as clearing the stage. So after banishing the big boo to the bottom of the screen, it's time to make our way to the Star Road. At last, the end is in sight, or so we would think. As soon as we arrive at Star World 1, we have quite a problem on our hands. This entire level is lined with blocks, and the only way to traverse through this place is to spin jump through them. Each block we break through gives us 50 points, and given how many of them we have to go through, this is going to rack up our score quite a bit. So much so that coming this way really isn't worth it. I tried finding some other methods to get through these blocks, but nothing was really working. I kinda had something going on with the cape feather here, as I was glitching through several blocks at once, but I wasn't able to get it to work consistently. I still have to break some blocks to make it work. Plus the cape feather itself is worth 1,000 points, so this really isn't the ideal way either. So I think we're just gonna have to try and avoid this level. So let's rewind back to Vanilla Secret 1 and just skip the keyhole this time and make our way to the normal exit. We have to carefully navigate this Rip Van fish away from the goal so that it doesn't turn into a coin at the end. And yeah, this gives new meaning to sleeping with the fishes. We'll take our 50 points here, play a bonus game to get some extra lives because why not, and then we'll make our way to the Donut Ghost House. Compared to the other ghost house, this one's gonna be a cakewalk. In fact, I don't think there's even anything in this level that can give you points, so just play it normally. Get the 50 points at the end, and we've opened the way to Donut Plains 3. But before we go into this level, I'd like to take a little detour. We're gonna go back to the Donut Secret House, but this time, instead of taking the vine up to Big Boo, we're just gonna take the normal exit this time. That's this door off to the right. This takes us to the gate where we can wait out the clock. But I ran into a little bit of a problem this time. When 1 second rolled around, the tape was at nearly the top of the gate. A normal jump just wasn't gonna cut it. But I was just barely able to get it with a running jump. So that was a little close. Anyway, taking this exit gives us access to this pipe and to Donut Secret 2, where we also get a little preview of the final world. Look at him joyriding around. So, going into the level itself, we are dealing with ice physics. There's a lot of enemies around, especially spike tops, but overall the level isn't too bad, at least until you get to the very end of it. This line of Koopa Troopas makes it a little difficult to get down below the pipe. But just wait until they've reached the height of their flight, and then you can squeeze between them and have just enough time to make it underneath the pipe. A very tight jump, but doable. Anyway, the level is over after that point, so another 50 points, we go through this other pipe, and then we meet up at Donut Plains 3. So regardless of which path is followed, we have the same number of points going into Donut Plains 3. Of course, staying on the main path is easier, but hey, if you want a change of scenery, consider going through Donut Secret 2. But either way, let's move on to Donut Plains 3. Here we have another athletic level with a lot of scrolling platforms, and a good number of enemies that are going to need to be avoided, as well as the introduction of fuzzies, which cannot be harmed in any way. For our purposes, this might be a good thing. Otherwise, not too much to say here, just a lot of simple platforming. We'll take 50 points at the end and move on to Donut Plains 4. Once again, it's an abundance of enemies that creates the challenge for this level, including this new enemy, the amazing Flying Hammer Brothers! who surprisingly have no score value tied to them, so we can knock them off their platform and ride it up to high places. The second half of this stage features Yoshi, as well as quite a few Galoombas, flying around and parachuting into the stage. It's pretty easy to wind up taking a hit here, so use Yoshi if you can. Hijack another flying platform, land at the gate, take 50 points, and we're moving on to castle number 2. We don't actually encounter anything in this castle that gives us points until just before the second door, where we have to do a crouch jump to get over this dry bones. There's a few more dry bones on the way up the tower that we want to be careful not to take out as we wait for the right opportunity to make our way up. And we kind of have to dance around this one at the very top as we wait for just the right time to enter the red door and take on Morton. Play your cards right and you can get all 3 stomps in before he can even make it to the wall. The trick, once again, is coming into the door at just the right time so that he has enough time to finish his dying animation and allow us to finish with 1 second on the clock. So that'll be another 50 points for us, and we are moving on to the next world, the Vanilla Dome. Vanilla Dome 1 is quite a long level, but hopefully we won't need to play the whole thing. Be mindful of the swoopers here at the very beginning, and this part where we have to walk down the bottom path would be quite troublesome if we didn't have access to Yoshi, because we'd have to do some very tight jumps to get over these buzzy beetles. Beware of power-ups attempting another sneak attack on us, and eventually we reach this point. Here we'll need Yoshi's help to hit the block, and then we must dismount him to reach the vine. With that, we go to another secret exit and take no points. Time now for Vanilla Secret 1. We need to take the alternate exit in this level in order to get back onto Star Road. And 2 vine climbs later, we reach the level where the pipe that we need to enter to reach the alternate exit can be found. Problem is, you're intended to use this springboard by placing it on top of some blue blocks activated by the blue switch palace, which isn't found until much later in the game. We could bypass this if we had access to Yoshi, so we're going to backtrack to a previous level, pick him up, and then come back. Now the only question is, how do we get him up there, because he can't climb these vines? Well, we take the springboard that's at the top, drop it down so that Yoshi can bounce his way up, then go back down and kick the springboard back up. And here's where we get to see one of Mario's magic tricks. If you kick a springboard upwards next to a vine and then start climbing it while holding the Y button, when the springboard hits you, it will disappear. But the game still thinks that you're holding it, so when you jump off the vine, there it is in your hands. I like to think that he just catches it in his back pocket or something and then just continues climbing the vine until he's ready to take it out. But anyway, now that we have Yoshi at the top of the vines, we can now set the springboard down, bounce up to the pipe, dismount him, and go through it. All that's left to do now is to get this Charge and Chuck away from the goal gate. Just jump on his head once to lead him away, then wait over by the end until 1 second to take your 50 points, and we are making our way to the Star World once again. Hopefully the rest of these Star World levels will be a bit kinder to us. Star World 2 is an underwater level, and starts off with a superstar attacking us with its 1,000 points of doom! Luckily, this baby Yoshi is here to protect us from this threat, and eating it causes it to grow up instantly, which is useful because normally feeding a baby Yoshi gets you 200 points. Anyway, not really anything to say about this level, it's just one flat terrain throughout, with the occasional fish swimming in from the right side. You can use Yoshi to eat them if they get in your way, and yeah, that's about it. And just swim under this pipe to get to the alternate exit, and we're moving on to Star World 3. This level is remarkably short, and you can finish it in 5 seconds just by beelining it to the goal, and there's very little to stop you from doing so. But of course, we're looking for the alternate exit, which in this level is located in the top half of the stage. Normally to get there, we need to take out this Lakitu, steal his cloud, and fly up through this little tube here to get to the key and keyhole. That would of course give us points, so we need to find another way up. Once again, we must turn to Yoshi to make our way up there, and since there are no shells for him to eat and fly up there, we're just gonna have to dismount him and through the opening at the top. It took a few tries to get it just right, but we do eventually make it up, get the key, and we're moving on to Star World 4. But before we go in, we need to go back and get another Blue Yoshi from Star World 2. Reason being is because the Blue Yoshi gains the ability to fly whenever it holds a Koopa shell in its mouth, and it can be any color to do so. But Yoshi will swallow the shell if it stays in his mouth too long, so we need to make sure to get a new one periodically. And we also need to make sure that the last shell that we eat is one that can be spit out because we need to hit this question block to get the key and go through the keyhole. At last, we can take the final Star Road path, leading us directly to the front door of Bowser's Castle, the final level in the game. Yoshi doesn't join us for the final level, and we're not coming back for him afterwards, so... So the way this castle works is that we have a set of 4 doors here, and we need to clear one of them in order to progress. But thanks to the power of video editing, I will go through each room individually and determine how difficult it is to get through scoreless. The first room is easier if you've filled in all of the Switch palaces before coming here, which, of course, in this run we have not, so a lot of the jumps are going to be a bit more dangerous, and overall this is probably not the best place to come. It is possible to do it scoreless, but you have better options. Door number 2 being one of them. Here you literally just climb onto a grate and move up and down to avoid enemies if they come close to you. The third door is kind of a maze with all these curtains blocking the way. Some of them you can jump through, others you can't. There's also a bunch of Mecha Koopas around, which if you stomp on them, they give you points. And you don't have a lot of headroom to try and avoid them either, so coming here can be a bit treacherous. Again, it's possible, but not recommended. Door number 4 is a pretty good choice as well. It's mostly just parkouring on scrolling blocks while you avoid these spark enemies that are floating around. As far as I can see, there's nothing in this room that can even give you points, so you can just play it normally. And that brings us to the second set of doors, and once again we need to clear just one room in order to move on. Door number 5 is pretty quick, but the only thing is you need to get the timing exactly right for when you run underneath all these spikes. If you're off by even a little bit, you're as good as crushed. The good news? No score to be had here. Door number 6 is possible, but I would not recommend it, simply because it's so long and there's a lot of things around here that want you dead. And a lot of just waiting around for the right opportunity to continue on, and yeah, just don't come here. Door number 7 contains a bunch of fire-breathing statues. They're pretty easy to read and pretty easy to avoid since most of them don't move. There are a couple who do move, so watch out for them, but otherwise not really too tough. And room number 8 is full of charging chucks that can do big jumps to move around in the room. Just try and run through as quickly as you can and try not to let them swarm you. And with that, we find ourselves in the final hallway, and it's completely in the dark. There is a light switch here that can illuminate the immediate area, kind of, but it's not too hard to see around even without it. This room is filled with ninjas and Mecha Koopas that can be hard to get around, and indeed you have to make a very tight jump to get past this Mecha Koopa in this very closed space. Alternately, you could just damage boost through it if you want. As for the ninjas, they always jump in the same pattern. 2 low jumps, a medium jump, and a high jump. It's best to move under them when they do the high jump. Other than that, just watch your jumps, and eventually you will reach the red door leading to the final Bowser fight. But once we go through this door, something interesting happens. The score bar is hidden. The game is no longer tracking our score the moment we enter this final boss fight. But just to be sure, I decided to try doing a few things during this boss fight. I jumped on some Mecha Koopas, I hit Bowser a couple of times, I picked up a Super Mushroom, and then I died. Went back into the stage, and saw that I still have 500 points that I went into this stage with. So there you have it, the run is officially over the moment you reach this red door. And with 500 points, we are officially the worst player ever at Super Mario World. And with a score of 500 points, it even manages to edge out Super Mario Bros. For the lowest score ever, so at the moment it is taking the top of the leaderboard. But before we close things out for today, I thought I would also take a look at the Game Boy Advance remake of this game, Super Mario Advance 2, and see if there were any major changes in how the score would play out. The route to the end of the game stays pretty much the same, but there are a few score changes that are worth noting. For starters, finishing a castle stage now gets you 200 points on the time bonus instead of 50. I don't like that. Our next score change can be found in Donut Plains 4 as we once again say hello to the Amazing Flying Hammer Brothers, who have now been recognized for their amazingness and now give you 800 points when you knock them off their platform. This means we can't use their platforms to reach higher ground. We could bring Yoshi to this level, and just Yoshi jump past this first one, but if we try and hatch another one, it will turn into a 1-up because Yoshi is still in the level. and that can be a problem for trying to get past a couple of big holes later in the level. But here is where Luigi finally gets his chance to shine. You see, in this game you can change between Mario and Luigi at any time. And Luigi does operate a little differently in this game. When he jumps, he flutters his feet, allowing him to stay airborne longer. This is a throwback to how he jumps in Mario 2, or more specifically, Mario Advance 1, which came out just a year before this game. So using his flutter jump, clearing these gaps without using the platform is not a problem. No Yoshi sacrifice necessary. I was also a bit surprised to learn that the springboard vine trick in Vanilla Secret 1 still works in the remake of this game. A bit surprised they didn't patch that one out, but since they didn't, we can still get Yoshi up to the top here and spring our way up to the pipe. Of course, if you're playing with Luigi, you don't even need to do that. Just put the springboard at the right place and you can flutter jump straight up to the pipe. This guy is borderline broken. But it is at Star World 3 where we come to our biggest problem in this version of the game. They decided to put a dragon coin at the top of the stairway leading up to where the tube is, which means we can't do a Yoshi jump off of there. But frankly, even if we could, they also went and made the tube one block higher than in the Super Nintendo version, so even if we could stand on that upper stair, we still wouldn't be able to reach the top. They really did everything they could to make it as hard as possible to get up here scoreless. And I don't like it. I spent a good while looking for alternative ways to get up there, and for a while it was looking like I was going to have to bite the bullet and take the Lakitu Cloud this time. I did at least find a good way to mitigate the damage if I were to go that route. Another function to playing as Luigi in this game is that when he rides Yoshi and eats an enemy, instead of swallowing it right away like he does with Mario, he holds it in his mouth for a few seconds, and he can spit it out at other enemies to defeat them. Again, this seems like a callback to Mario Advance, where you can pick up enemies and throw them at others to defeat them. By doing this, defeating Lakitu is only worth 100 points instead of 200 if you used a grab block. Still, it wasn't really sitting with me, so I tried for a little bit more to look for another method, and then I finally settled on an idea. As we all know, Yoshi can bounce on spiked enemies and hazards, including Spinies, so I thought maybe I could bounce on one and then Yoshi jump my way up. I waited on the second-to-last stair until Lakitu was coming towards me from the left side, jumped, and then bounced off of a Spiny right as the Lakitu was throwing it, giving me just enough height to get up into the tube and then Yoshi jump up to the top. All the while, I can't really see what I'm doing because the camera isn't scrolling up for some reason. But as you can see, I was successful in pulling it off, and so we clear this stage once again without any score added, despite the developers' best efforts to make me look like a skilled player. That'll show them! And the only other thing noteworthy about the GBA version is the final level. The level itself is pretty much the same as before, but then when you go through the double red door at the end and confront Bowser, suddenly your score bar returns to the screen. Uh-oh. That means the things that happen in this boss fight do add to your score, including jumping on Mecha Koopas. They're worth 200 points and we need to hit Bowser with 6 of them to win the fight, which means we're taking minimum 1,200 points from this enemy. Alas, it cannot be helped because there's no other way to damage Bowser in this fight, so we'll just bite the bullet, hit him with the 6 Mecha Koopas, avoid Peach's attempts to sabotage our score, and eventually Bowser goes down. At last, we can call a close to... Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Just like with the other boss fights, we have to wait out the timer until just the right time and make sure there's only 1 second on the clock at the end of the fight. And this stage gives you 800 seconds, so it's gonna take a while. But once we finally do it right, we find that the score is about 2,000 points higher than the Super Nintendo version, still relatively low, but a fun experiment nonetheless. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, we have laid claim to the bottom of the barrel once again, and proven that we are the worst player ever at Super Mario World, both on the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance. I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on the next Worst Player Ever Challenge. See you then!